What's happening, guys? Jeff Robbins here. Welcome back to the channel. So this is part 2 of my IAME K100 engine rebuild. I was just going to do 2 parts, but I'm thinking I'll probably end up doing 3, maybe even 4 parts. So in this one, we're just going to exclusively focus on honing the cylinder. I get a lot of questions about it, and it seems to me that this is the one thing that holds a lot of guys back from rebuilding their own engines. And it's actually simpler than you think. So I've got a bunch of tools behind me on my bench. So I'm going to reposition the camera. We'll go through all the tools that I'm going to be using. I'll show you the honing jig that I built, and then once we're done with that, we'll go ahead and we'll hone the cylinder that I just pulled off my KA. And once we're done, we'll check the results. Okay, so let's go over some of the tools that I'll be using when we hone this cylinder out. So there's a couple different styles of hone you can get. You can get this style right here, and this is what I started out using, and these work. I'm not going to tell you can't use them. Basically, it's got 3 stones on it, and then it's got this little adjuster here that puts tension on this spring, and depending on how tight you have it, that determines how much pressure that the stones are going to be pressing up against the sidewalls inside the bore. So if you needed to just do a quick light hone, you could loosen it up. If you wanted to try to take away some material, you could crank down on this so it's got a lot of pressure. So I've got that one. This one's the same style, just a little bit bigger. The only problem I had with these is on this little one, these stones are just so small that they can get snagged in the ports. And the other thing that I've also noticed is they do move independently a little bit. So if your bore has some ovalization, it doesn't necessarily get that out as the best as you would want to get it out. I think this one was a little more dramatic. So once this is all collapsed, you see they still got a little bit of play in them. So if your bore isn't quite perfectly circular, that may not quite work for you if you're trying to get that ovalization board out of there. But they do work. So if that's all you got, don't feel bad. Definitely go ahead and use it. I used these for quite a few years actually, before I started doing customer engines. They take a little more time, but they definitely do work for you. And since then, I've gotten this style of hone, and I can't think of the brand name. I think it's Lyle, I think is the brand of this hone. And basically this hone only has 2 stones on it, and then it's got these little scrubbers. But to adjust this one, basically all you do is you turn the top, and you'll notice that it starts pushing the stones out. So once you get that down in your bore, all you do is twist this, and that'll get the pressure so that you can actually start honing your cylinder. I've got this one as well. This one's the same style, but this was a cheap one, straight from India. I still do use this one just because it's so small. I need to use this one on minis. It works great too. It's just a little cheaper than the other one, and the stones on this one, they like to break all the time. But they're essentially the same style of hone. So what you do is you just get your drill, and then you can slide the hone right into your drill. It's got these 2 little holding screws, one on each side. Just like that. Drop that down in your cylinder, and that's how you hone your cylinder. I really do like this one, just because since it's a little more rigid than those other ones, this one does take out the ovalization. And also with this style of hone, you can get you got all different kind of stones you can get with different coarsenesses. And if you really need to take away some material, say you want to hog your bore out a little bit, you can put some of these coarser stones on there, put this in there, tighten it up, bore it out, tighten it up, bore it out, and you can take away a ton of material using these coarse stones. But it's something you definitely got to be careful with. You want to, do a little bit of honing, measure, do a little bit of honing and measure, so you don't blow your bore out way past what you're trying to do. But there's all different kind of stones you can get. And to put the stones in, there's these 3 little set screws. Just undo those. take your stone out. If you wanted to do some coarse stones, you put that one in. Obviously you'd want to have the same stone on each side, but that's how you swap the stones out and use that to hone out your engine. Let's see what else we got here. You're also going to need a way to measure. So you're going to want to know where you're starting and where you're going. So there's a couple different styles. This is the one I had at first, this little T-style gauge right here. These two little, I don't know what you'd call them, but these guys are on springs. And if you tighten this down, it actually locks them in place. So to measure your bore, all you do is slide it in there, lock it down, and then rock the gauge like that, and it'll come out. And that's going to be the width of your bore. And then you can just get your digital calipers, or if you've got one of these, you can just measure and you can find out where your bore is. You can get all different sizes. Since then, I've gone with this style simply just because it's quicker. These are accurate. I've had no issues with these, and sometimes I even use these to double check my work just to make sure. But with this style, it just makes it a ton easier. So you can just drop this in here, rock it back and forth, and you can see the dial indicator up there moving, and it's like finding top dead center on an engine. Once it stops and starts going back, that's your measurement. And I like this one because while I'm honing the cylinder, you know, I can hone it, make a few passes, measure, hone it, make a few passes, measure, just to make sure I know where I'm at and where I'm going. So I would highly recommend getting this style of bore gauge. It just will make your life a whole lot easier. And you can get different tips that go in here for the different sizes of bores you may be honing. Just like that. And then to find zero on this gauge, what you'll want to do is I use this caliper, and you'll set it to whatever measurement that you want, and then zero your gauge out by putting this in here and just rocking it until you get your gauge zeroed out, so you know where your gauge is, and then you can just count forward and back from where your bore reads to find your measurement. So I hope that makes sense. If you guys got questions on that, definitely hit me up in the comments if I'm not clear enough on that. Let me see what else we got. That should be pretty much it as far as the hones. You know, you can get a ball hone. It's a different style of hone. This is a rigid hone. The reason you can't use a ball hone, because what it'll do is it'll start putting champers on the edges of your ports, and that's against the rules. These edges are essentially razor sharp, and you have to leave them as is. If you got teched in all the grooves or all the edges of your ports are all rounded off, you would definitely get DQ'd. They'd think you're cheating, trying to port your engine or something. So you must use a rigid hone when you hone at least if you're trying to be within the rules for IAME KA100s. Pretty much all the US, you can't have your edges on your ports all rounded off. So just definitely be mindful of that. So let me reposition the camera, and I'm going to show you the jig that I put the cylinder in to hold it in place while I'm honing. All right, so this is the honing jig. And I built this completely out of stuff I got from Home Depot. So essentially all it does is it allows me to place the cylinder in here. See if I can do this while on camera. And then what I can do is I lift this up. I've got these two supports. Drop that down, and then I can just tighten this up. just like that. So what that does is that just holds my cylinder in place while I'm honing. And what I do is I've got a tote from Home Depot, and you'll see that once we start honing. This slides right down in the tote, because once you start honing, all that little metal dust will just get everywhere. And it's I mean, look at my hands just from touching this stuff. It gets everywhere. So I put it down in a tote just to keep it clean. But essentially, once it's in there, all I'll do is drop my hone in, tighten it up. Obviously, you'd want your drill hooked up to that, and you just hone out your cylinder. So what I'll do is I'll start just like this, make a few passes, inspect it, measure it, and then what I'll do is I'll pull the cylinder out, flip it over, and hone from the bottom, just to make sure that I get it as even as possible. Because what you'll tend to do is, if you're just honing from one side, you'll end up spending more time up here at the top than you do down at the bottom, and you'll start making your cylinder wider at the top than it is at the bottom. So that's why I'll flip it over once or twice, just depending on how much honing I actually need to do. I'll flip the cylinder back and forth just to make sure that it's measured perfectly from top to bottom. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'll go ahead, I'm going to put this into the tote, reposition the camera, and I'm going to do some honing on the cylinder. We'll check it, and then once we're done, what I like to do is I take this out to my garage and I throw it in a sink. I've got a sink out there, and I wash it out real good. But one thing you'll want to make sure you do once you're done is you'll want to get yourself just like a little shop rag, and I fold it up. And then what I do is I cover this in WD-40, get it real nice and soaked, so that as soon as I take this out of the sink, I've got my air compressor ready to go, blow it all out, get all the water out of it. And then as soon as I've done that, I put this rag in here and I get WD-40 all around on the inside of that bore. If you let that bore dry, it'll essentially rust immediately. It'll get surface rust on it. So as soon as you get it out from when you're done washing it, blow it out with your air compressor, get it as dry as you can, and then hurry and hit the inside of the bore with some WD-40 all the way up and down, just to prevent that from rusting. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to get this thing set up in the tote. We'll get this honed out. And you know what, one thing before we go too far, when you're honing, all right guys, so I probably ought to mention why we're honing our cylinder. And essentially what we're doing is we're just trying to prep the inside of the bore for the new ring, so that once we get the new ring in there, that it'll actually seat up against the cylinder walls and give you a good seal, so you've got some good compression. I'm not sure exactly what angle you want to hone it at, but for me, I try to get my crosshatch to be somewhat like this. So when I look in my bore, I want my crosshatch to kind of be on that type of angle. So I mean, I'm not sure what, I don't know, maybe that's a 35-degree angle in between the cross hatches, and there'll be a ton of them in there. So I mean, it'll be, you know, just tons of scratches. But once you look in there, you're able to see the crosshatch. So I mean, you're not going to want real shallow crosshatch like that. That's probably a little too shallow. And you obviously don't want, you know, real vertical crosshatch either. So kind of in the middle there. So this is pretty much how I like to see mine. And to determine this, it's going to be how fast you spin the drill and how fast you're going up and down in the cylinder. So definitely something to keep in mind is when you're finished, to look at your crosshatch and just make sure that it's, I don't know, somewhere between a 35 and 45 degree angle, I would say. And what that's going to do is that's just going to help hold the oil in the bore so that your piston doesn't seize. So that's the goal from honing it, is we're just trying to get some scratches in there, prep the surface so that once we get the new ring in there, that it seats good and we've got good compression. So that's kind of what I like to see. I mean, you can try it and do whatever you want. You know, I've heard guys say that you don't need any crosshatch. So I mean, who knows? So I try to avoid having real shallow ones and real, you know, vertical ones. So I mean, that angle right there is pretty small, and then this angle right here would be huge, right there, and then right there. So I kind of go in the middle. I try to get my crosshatch to look something like that. So when we're done, I'll shine the flashlight in there and see if we can see it. But something I forgot to mention a little earlier. All right, so now we're looking at the cylinder and my jig down in the little tote that I've got for it. So I built the jig specifically to fit in this tote just so I could keep things a little cleaner, because this does get kind of messy. And you know what? Something I didn't mention is I hone my cylinders dry. You know, when I first started, I actually bought this little lubricating pump, so that I actually have this thing mounted to the back of the tote right here. And then I had these little squirters that would sit there, and it would sit there and squirt oil the entire time while I was honing the cylinder. You know, for me, all it did was make a mess. I really don't see the benefit from using the oil versus dry honing. So I stopped using this. It was so messy, and the cleanup was a nightmare. And I was online talking to some guys, and the guy was like, "So I just honed my cylinders dry." And I was like, "What?" So that was the last time that I've honed using oil. So I had this thing, and it would just sit there and pump oil, whatever this machining, grinding fluid that I have here, and that's what I was using. So I hone it dry. I've had nothing but good results, and the cleanup's easier, and it's just better all around. So I hone these cylinders dry. So let's go ahead and get this in here. And I've got some medium stones on here right now, kind of just to help speed it up for the video. So I'm just going to make a couple passes with the medium stones, and then I'm going to switch over to the fine stones to finish it off. And this is one of those things that you're just going to need to get a feel for, pressure-wise, how fast you pull the hone up and down, and how much pressure you're putting on the trigger for how fast your drill is going to spin. So just something that you'll get better at over time for sure. And when you go to take it out, make sure you relieve the pressure so you don't drag the stones up the cylinder walls as you pull it out. Make a couple passes. Check it out with the flashlight to see what it looks like. Get your bore gauge, take some measurements. And I mean, when you just lightly hone it, guys, a lot of material is not going to come off. See, and with that little bit of honing I did, it's essentially measuring the exact same as before I started honing. And I mean, it already looks 1,000 times better than it did before I started. Looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go lightly with the medium stones a few more times, flip it over, do a few more passes with the medium stones, and then I'm going to go to the fine to finish it off. And make sure when you get this in here that you lower the hone at least past the ports. You don't want to start opening this up on the ports and catch one of your ports. And I gotta apologize, guys. This is hella awkward trying to do this with the camera, so bear with me. It's a little spot right here that I'm trying to get honed out, a little shiny spot. And you can, excuse me, you can tighten these with a spanner. I wouldn't recommend doing it because you can essentially lock this thing down, and if you get it too tight, this whole thing will start spinning on you. So just finger tight it, go slow. All right, I'm going to swap out to the fine fine stones. So one thing you'll want to do if you're taking away a lot of material, these stones will get dirty. You know, that's probably something that the oil may actually help with. But you'll just want to get a wire brush and just scrub off your stones. Keep those nice and clean. Just like that. You'll want to do that every so often, even while you're honing, just to make sure that your stones are clean. So I'm just going to swap over to the fine stones real quick. Hit it with the fine stones. probably pretty close to good. So just that little bit of honing that I did on my gauge, I've essentially opened it up about 1/100th of a millimeter just with that light honing that I've done. So just to keep that in mind, I haven't hardly had any pressure, and I've taken away about 1/100th of a millimeter from the inside of the bore. All right, looks good. As long as I take my final measurements and it's good, I think we're done. Just make sure. Check the bottom one last time. Okay, so that's it, guys. That's all the honing that this one's gonna need. I mean, if there was some deep scoring on the inside of there, it may take a little longer. And like I mentioned, if you wanted to bore it out so you could get a bigger piston in there, you would want to start with the coarse stones, and you know, you make some passes, and like I mentioned, you can go through some material pretty quick. So like I mentioned, pretty simple process, guys. So I'm just going to take this out into the garage, clean it out. See if you guys can see in there a little bit. All nice and honed out. So I'm going to take it out to the garage, clean it out, and I'll bring it back in and I'll show you the inside of the bore once I've got it all cleaned out and back here on the bench. Okay guys, so here's the finished product. As you can see, I've got a freshly honed cylinder ready for the new piston and ring. And try to show you the crosshatch. So if I'm looking at it, my crosshatch is on an angle roughly about like that. If you guys can see that feeler gauge. So pretty close to the drawing that I had, maybe a tiny bit shallower, but that's about the angle that my crosshatch is sitting on. And something I like to do, so I'll just turn it on its side and then I'll get the piston that I plan on putting in Just kind of do a little quick test fit, and I can just feel if my piston's too tight or if it's too loose, just by putting it in. Kind of got a feel for it. You're just going to want to make sure that you've definitely got enough clearance there. So I think the rebuild manual says 9/100ths of an inch clearance. That's definitely one of the things that you can play with. If I had to say anything, I would say 9/100ths is not enough. You're gonna want more than that, but it's just something you'll have to play with and find out where you like to build them. But that's it, guys. See if you can see that crosshatch. It's tough to see, but pretty simple job, guys. So all right, for the next one, I'm gonna do four different videos. So part 3, what we'll do is we're gonna rebuild the crank, true it up if we need to, so I'll show you how I do all that, and then in the final video we'll just go ahead and put everything back together, maybe do some final checks just to make sure we're good to go. But as always, guys, appreciate you for tuning in. Plan your race your plan, have a good time at the track.